shows on Fox is it gives me an opportunity not only to introduce you to some stellar individuals, but to talk about history and philosophy and economics and all these things that are generally not discussed on platforms like this. American history. Maybe I ought to do a show on American history every week. But we're going to use tonight's show. It's going to be very exciting, I think, very informative, to discuss some American history. Why? Because there are reprobates, historical illiterates on other channels who want you to believe certain things that are not true. Why? Well, mostly because they're not very bright. And so, as I said the other day, part of my job here is to unravel what they do. But more importantly, in the next 15 minutes, you're going to learn more about American history than you probably have ever learned, certainly more than you've ever learned on TV or radio, and mostly more than you ever learned in high school or college. And we're going to start by using as a foil a reprobate who is a political reporter in Washington, D.C., who appeared on MSNBC, where we all go to get facts and information, don't we? And I want to deal with this because this is a frontal assault on Christianity. We've had a frontal assault on Judaism and Jews for the last many months in this country. It's been given voice by MSNBC and CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the usual platforms. But now they're pushing this idea of Christian nationalism, which they're trying to link up with the Klan and things of that sort. The media in this country, they abuse their authority, they lie, and they try and preach the radical left agenda. How about we do a little bit of history tonight and straighten things out? So this is from last week, a political reporter on MSNBC, a terrible, poisonous combination. Go.
There's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God. The problem with that is that they are determining men, it is men, are determining what God is telling them. And in the past, that so-called natural law is, it's a pillar of Catholicism. Catholicism, for instance, it's been used for good in social justice campaigns. Right. Martin Luther King evoked it in talking about civil rights. But now you have an extremist element of conservative Christians who say that this applies specifically to issues including abortion, gay marriage, and it's going much further than that.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, the sanctimony that the left has when they're spewing stupid things is remarkable to me. Now, obviously, she doesn't know a damn thing about American history or America's founding, other than what she's heard from some left-wing tenured professor or her friends. And the founders of this country, the most important philosopher at the time was John Locke. John Locke wrote a number of essays and treatises, including the second treatise on government. This had an enormous impact on the founders of this country. Other historians have looked very carefully at the pamphlets that were written at the time. Thomas Paine was a pamphleteer, but there were many. And John Locke was cited more than any other pamphleteer. And why? John Locke talked about the free will, the individual, unalienable rights, natural law. And in some ways, he was borrowing from Aristotle. Aristotle talked about two characters of the law. He talked about natural law, which is a universal law. In other words, murder is wrong, whether man passes a law or not. It's wrong in America. It's wrong in China. The fact that governments don't follow it and individuals don't follow it is a different story. But morality does not come from man. Morality comes from a higher authority. And then there's what he called particular law. What's particular law? Law made by man. So there's universal truths, universal law, God-given, particular laws created by man. Some are just, some are unjust, some are democratic, some are authoritarian, whatever it is. This is basic stuff for those of us who've studied it over the decades. And the founders of our country, during the revolutionary period, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, what did they rely on? Who did they rely on? They relied on Aristotle. They relied on a great Roman senator by the name of Cicero. They relied on John Locke. They relied on Montesquieu. They relied on a gentleman by the name of Sidney. They relied on all these great thinkers, Aquinas. That's who they relied on. Why? Because really this is about Western Enlightenment. Western Enlightenment. This is about a nation that was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. And yet we're told every day that it's not. We're told every day that this is an unjust country. We're told every day that it's about white privilege. We're told every day something that's a lie. Well, I would remind them that Karl Marx was white too. So is their hero Franklin Roosevelt. He was white too. So is their hero Joe Biden, who's actually translucent, if you want to know the truth. But for instance, Aristotle wrote Nicomachean Ethics. In one of his essays on that, he talks about this. John Locke, the second treatise on government. Virtually every single founder read that book. Sidney on discourses concerning government. Cicero on the Republic and on the laws. And I could go on and on and on. It's all there for the understanding. Where she, Politico, MSNBC, and the bobbleheads that are just saying yes, 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 who do they rely on? They're so moronic, they don't even know who they rely on. You know who they rely on? Philosophers like Rousseau and Hegel. And Marx stole from Hegel. All three white men, by the way, just want to remind the left. And that's the modern-day Democrat Party. That man gives us rights and privileges. And we need the right man. Certain types of men. So, in other words, it's a very dangerous ideology, and it's preposterous. Now, I want to talk about the Declaration of Independence that relies on John Locke and Aristotle and those. Follow me carefully. Now we get into a really smart part. If colleges were actually teaching this subject, they should be teaching something like this. Listen to this. Reason cannot by itself explain why there's reason. Science cannot by itself explain why there's science. Man's discovery and application of science are products of reason. Reason and science can explain the existence of matter, but they can't explain why there is matter. They can explain the existence of the universe, but they can't explain why there's a universe. They can explain the existence of nature and the law of physics, but they cannot explain why there is nature and the law of physics. They can explain the existence of life, but they cannot explain why there is life. They can explain the existence of consciousness, but they cannot explain why there's consciousness. Science is a critical aspect of human existence, but it cannot address the spiritual and moral nature of man. In this respect, science is a dead end, around which the atheists refuse to reason. Reason itself informs man of his own limitations, and in doing so, directs him to the discovery of a force greater than himself. A supernatural force responsible for the origins of not only human existence, but all existence, and which itself has always existed and will always exist. These are my opinions in Liberty and Tyranny, but they were also the views of the founders of your country. For most, the supernatural reveals itself in the Creator, God. Man seeks God's guidance through faith and prayer. The agnostic accepts the supernatural, but is not sure of the form of its existence. The deist accepts that God created the universe and man's condition, but left it to man to sort things out through reason. But man is more than a physical creature. As Edmund Burke, who was at the time a crucially important Irish member of the British Parliament, who looked at the American Revolution and supported it, who looked at the French Revolution and strongly opposed it, because he said the American Revolution was about representative government, the French Revolution was about destroying their society, much like the revolution of the left today. What did he say? There's but one law for all, namely the law which governs all law, the law of our Creator, the law of humanity, justice, equity, the law of nature and of nations. This is the natural law that penetrates man's being, and which the founding fathers, my words, adopted as the principle around which civilized American society would be organized. Your Declaration of Independence, which was the consensus position of the colonists, appeals specifically to the laws of nature and nature's God. It provides further, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's John Locke. The founders were enlightened men, but not purely of the age of enlightenment. They were highly educated, well-informed men who excelled at reason and subscribed to science, but worshiped neither. They comprehended them, their strengths as well as weaknesses. At least two founders, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, are widely believed to have been deists. They were men of varying denomination, but united and emphatic in the belief that the Creator was the origin of their existence and the source of their reason. Look, I'm not preaching religion here, although I'm a man of faith. I'm telling you your history, which in a 50-second soundbite is eviscerated, obliterated by a numbskull on MSNBC from Political. Now, deeper. Ready to go deeper with me? Come on, this is fun. Is it possible there is no natural law and man can know moral order and unalienable rights from his own reasoning, unaided by the supernatural or God? There are, of course, those who argue this case, including the atheists and others who attempt to distinguish natural law from divine providence. It is not the view adopted by the founders. This position would, it seems, lead man to arbitrarily create his own morality and rights, or create his own arbitrary morality and rights. Right and wrong, just and unjust, good and bad would be relative concepts susceptible to circumstantial applications. We see it all over the world. We see it all over the world. Moreover, by what justification would life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness be unalienable rights if there is no natural law? Since reason alone cannot make them inviolable, what then is natural law if its origin is unknown or rejected? It is nothing more than a human construct. An individual may benefit from the moral order and unalienable rights around which society functions while rejecting their divine origin. But the civil society cannot organize itself that way. It would become unstable and vulnerable to anarchy and tyranny, imperiling all within it, especially the individual. The abandonment of natural law is the adoption of tyranny in one form or another, because there is no humane or benevolent alternative to natural law. Now, some resist the idea of natural law's relationship to divine providence, for they fear it leads to intolerance, even theocracy. They have it backwards. If man is endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, he's endowed with these rights no matter his religion, or whether he has allegiance to any religion, or whether he believes in God. It is natural law divined by God and discoverable by reason that prescribes the inalienability of the most fundamental and eternal human rights, rights that are not conferred on man by man and therefore cannot legitimately be denied to man by man. Liberty. Individual liberty, free will. We don't get that from Congress. We don't get that from the Supreme Court. We don't get that from Marxist dictators or fascists. Where does it come from? Now, people may be atheists. That's fine. They may not believe in God. They may not know what they believe. But this society, this culture was created around the belief that God created these principles. And it is the divine nature of natural law that makes permanent man's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The last sentence of the Declaration of Independence, the founders proclaimed, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Now, one other thing about Christianity, and I say this as a Jew who thanks God every day, for the benevolence of Christians and their faith. Despite its different denominations, Christianity was and is America's dominant religion. There's no dispute that Judeo-Christian values and traditions have and do influence America's fundamental laws and policies. However, despite its varying practices and applications in the colonies and the early years of the states, Christianity itself does not preach operational dominance over the body politic or seek justification from it, even while it promotes and defends its teaching through proselytism and activism. In contrasting Christianity to, say, Islam, in this respect, Alexis de Tocqueville observed that Muhammad professed to derive from heaven and he has inserted in the Quran not only a body of religious doctrines, but political maxims, civil and criminal laws, and theories of science. The gospel, the Christian gospel, on the contrary, only speaks of the general relations of men to God and to each other, beyond which it inculcates and imposes no point of faith, which is why we have the First Amendment, the free exercise of religion. It doesn't say the free exercise of Christianity and Christianity only. Long story short, if we follow Politico and MSNBC, we will cease to be a free society. They may not know it, but they are embracing the ideology of tyrants and totalitarians, of Marx, Hegel, and Rousseau, and they are rejecting the entire basis for the American system of government. And they're doing it because they want to trash and smear Christianity. Now, one additional point. I want you to look at something. This is Arlington National Cemetery. I want you to look at Arlington National Cemetery. I want you to look at this. Row after row after row after row. The vast majority of those headstones have a cross on them. Not all of them, the vast majority. The vast majority of the people who've died for this country, who are buried at Arlington and other military sites, are white Christian men. I'm sick and tired of this idea of white privilege, Christian nationalism, the attack on the people who are so responsible for this nation. When you look at Arlington Cemetery, my question to you is this. Do you think those people there, many of them who died 17, 18, 20, 25, 30 years old, do you think they were privileged? Do you think they were white privileged Christians? They died defending this country, including the First Amendment, natural law, the law of nature, morality, truth, universal truths. And they populate that cemetery like no other group. I'll be right back.